I know where there's some, right here in the hall, clerk.
No, Molly, not in there. I have
I noticed while doing some of the caps that the cable harness that comes down from the phonograph carries AC. All the AC cables are cracked, so there are some really plastic ones in there. The cloth bound ones are fine for signal, but the plastic bound ones they used for AC transmission are all cracked, so I need to get those out of there. And the only way to do that is to take out the volume control, the volume potentiometer. And to do that, I have to take off the dial cord. So start with pulling the, seeing how this faceplate comes out. There are a couple of set screws on the shaft of the tuning condenser that need to come out. The pointer is a nice piece of brass, and I think it's a friction fit onto the end of the shaft, so we'll see here in a minute. But the set screws are being difficult to get loose. And I'm not exactly sure how the face plate itself is going to come off. We'll find out. So hold the tuning condenser in place. Yeah, it's just a friction fit. So we'll put that in the box. It's very shiny for some reason. I'm surprised it isn't all green with tarnish. There it isn't. So that's that out. Now I can more easily get at the set screws to go into the shaft. I've unscrewed two screws in the bottom of that steel plate that holds the faceplate, and it just shows that the entire tuning condenser is floating on the chassis, or it's being held up by that, but so it doesn't reach down and touch the chassis. And when we get into the power supply section and putting that back together, we'll see why that is. It has to do with making this chassis a little less hazardous to work on. So there are three rivets, one in the middle that I'm working on right now, one in the upper left corner, upper right corner, and one in the lower right corner, that look like they're just friction fit through to the back side. You can see it right there. So I'm going to try to push those back out from the back side and see if that works. Finding something to prop up a chassis is always a pain. If it were a bigger chassis, I have a chassis holder. Yeah, so those slip right out. So you give them a push in the back, then tweezers manage to pry them right out without damaging anything. So that's good. There it is. It's silver foil paper with black silk screening on it, and it's pretty crappy looking. I'm going to have to see if I can do something about that without ruining the reflectivity of the paper they used on there. Once the dial plates are moved, then that exposes the pulley, the dial cord pulley, as you can see here. Just slips off the shaft. And you'll notice behind there are three screws that hold this plate onto the tuning condenser, and they're all isolated. That again has to do with safety. So the cord string is held on there by a spring. The spring fits down over a couple of prongs that stick out of the edge of that pulley. I'm trying to loosen them now without breaking anything. I've never seen this before, which probably means it exists everywhere and I've just never seen it. Anyway, the spring pops out, and then that frees the cord.
Things that could have real ramifications. I think everyone's eyebrows go up. And what we should remind people is an impeachment inquiry, right? This is the part where you investigate and figure out what are the things that if you're going to charge the president with articles of impeachment, what those articles would be.
dial cord just pulls free, and then I can start to remove the pot that frees up the pot, which is not very complicated. It's held in to the chassis with one screw, which I've already taken out. And then the process is to desolder.
So just because the Republicans floated out
The dial cord is in awfully good shape, so there's no need to replace that. It was wound in the wrong place on the shaft. There's a collar, the brass collar has a groove in it, a dip, which the cord is supposed to run, and which the cord is supposed to run, and it was running more toward the front than that. You can see the wear point there. So I don't know whether that means the pulley that fits on the tuning condenser shaft was in backward or not. Have to take a look. Also, I'll take the pot apart and clean it up later to make sure that it's fine.
Rule affects insurers. Do you know, like, explanations of benefits that you get? Yes. Okay, so the idea is that you would get that up front before you go get a service. You would get something that tells you what it costs, whatever you're going to get.
Yeah,
What it
that'd be
costs,
nice.
what the plan would pay, and what you would owe at the end of it. And that's a proposed rule, so this kicks off a 60-day comment.
At this point, it's become obvious that that wiring harness that comes down from the phonograph has to be removed. There are only 4 or 5 wires inside that plastic tube, which is really stiff. The signal ones seem fine, but the power ones, like that one right there, have the insulations all come off, and they're such a shock hazard and a short problem that they'll have to be replaced. So I have to take the wiring harness off, which is a pain in the neck. There's also inside that bundle of cords a shielded cable, which I'm going to want to try to salvage, because replacing that would be just, I can't imagine how we would do it. So it's going to be some work, no doubt about it. The volume control pod includes the on-off switch, as most do. It's fairly standard, completely standard on-off switch. Volume control is as you might expect, with one difference: it does have a center tap. Actually, a slightly off-center tap connects to that 22K ohm resistor there. So we'll take it apart and see if we can clean it up. We'll test it first. It works according to the meter, but it has some odd pauses. So it just looks like it needs cleaning up. The on and off switch works fine, as you can see on the meter. No problems there, other than the getting a good connection on the connectors. So that's fine. The volume control has some bumpy spots. It goes up and then retreats at one point, and it goes back down a little bit. So it's probably just dirty. These things almost never wear out. It will occasionally break, but this one is apparently not broken. It just needs to be cleaned. So we'll do that. I like some pots that have a way to spray cleaner inside them. This one is pretty tightly sealed up, so it has to come apart. Fairly simple task. Take that nut loose, take the mounting bracket off, and then look for the tabs that need to be peeled back. This one has a paper isolator on it as well, which I've marked to make sure I retain the orientation thereof. So I'll just pry that up.
Yeah. Yeah, and then 1 year we did like Indian, of course, she's Indian, so we did like tandoori style turkey. We of course had Serbian style as well. What's a Serbian style? Well, north where I come from, they do eat a lot of turkey, and they usually eat it with a pasta called mlinci, which is also found in Croatian and Slovenian cuisines as well. I think you know in Italy as well, but it's pasta, so regular pasta, but you will toast it on like baking bread. So it's delicious, fatty but delicious. And pies, but maybe you haven't decided on your menu yet this year. You haven't left lightly. We have not yet, yes. But last year, what were the pies on your table? Last year, what did we had? We had chocolate cream pie. I remember that. That's my favorite. And I think Shilpa made. I can't remember. I think it was I asked my chef instructor which would be the best culinary school to go to. And without even batting an eyelid, he said the CIA, the Culinary Institute of America, and that was it. Do you remember your first Thanksgiving here? Like, oh my God, I so vividly remember the first Thanksgiving. One of the faculty members, there were a few of us who didn't go home because, commuting to India would have been a long way off. So it was the first holiday as such that I celebrated in America. And we went to this faculty member's house. There were around 10 of us students, and then their entire family. It was a cacophony, and I absolutely loved it and adored it because, to me, till date, that's what I associate Thanksgiving with. It's togetherness, it's family, it's a lot of food, and it's just. Which has turkey tikka masala. We brine it and then marinate it in Indian Indian spices and cook it in a tandoor. But there's also a vegetarian version, which is the paneer version of the same thing. And then the sides are, there is a vegetable palau biryani stuffing, and then there is a green bean coconut poriyal, which is a coconut and a green bean saute. Then we do a corn chana dal, which is a corn and a lentil soup. Then there's a cranberry 5-spice chutney. Then we do a chestnut naan. We do papadum, pickles, sweet potato raita, and then a pumpkin spice bread pudding, which is topped with some marshmallows, which have been which have been s'mored.
And now the potentiometer works as it should, nice and smooth all the way around, so no problem. Put the bracket back on and it'll be ready to reinstall in the radio.